This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd Dawalt, and we are all about helping construction business owners and leaders create freedom, impact, and wealth. In this episode, you'll meet our new Director of Customer Success, Leyah Valgardson. You'll learn a little about her background, and you'll hear about some of the results that she's getting for our clients. You'll also hear about some interesting insights and trends we've picked up on with construction business owners, including the top 5 fears you'll need to push through and expect if you're going to grow your business. You'll hear about how business owners tend to get in their own way and how you are probably your own worst enemy. Leah talks about shoulding all over yourself and how you probably could be guilty of that. We talk about the difference between harmony and balance and which one you may want to strive for. Some practical tips to stop screwing yourself over. We'll talk about what's in it for you to join the Systematize Your Construction Business program and quite a few other things. Before we get into that conversation, I have a few resources I want to share with you. When it comes to experiencing growth in your construction business, you have to think differently about how you run it. Because to eliminate chaos, maximize revenue, and grow your business, you can't do everything on your own, right? You eventually realize that your valuable and expensive time shouldn't be spent on tasks like bookkeeping that can be easily delegated to someone else. And this is where our friends at Leah can help. Because whether you need a US-based bookkeeper, a virtual assistant, social media manager, or website specialist, Leah has the right, highly vetted, US-based professional ready to help you. And to help you get started, Leah is offering their latest book, Delegate to Elevate, for free. In this ebook, you'll learn how to reclaim time to focus on the things only you can do by delegating, to unleash the powerful, multiplying effects of entrusting others. To claim this offer, just text the word EDGE to the number 55123 for your free copy today. That's EDGE to the number 55123. Start delegating your bookkeeping to an expert from Leah to regain your peace of mind. You'll wonder why you waited so long. Right. Leah, welcome back to the podcast, not only as a guest, but also as a team member. So it's good to have you on the team and good to have you back on the podcast. Let's jump into it. Introduce yourself. Talk about who you are, what you've been up to, your background, whatever you think we need to know about you.
All of the above. Okay, happy to do so. Thank you, Todd. So my name is Leyah Valgardson. I actually have been in the home building industry really my whole life. My dad is a general contractor building custom homes. And I remember being a very young girl going out on the job site and picking up garbage. And as I grew and my skill set grew, then I got to do all kinds of things, from pulling electric wire to framing to roofing to foundation forms, which is my least favorite thing to do. But really, I was raised in construction. And after college, I actually started my career in Las Vegas working for Pulte Homes, so one of the large production home builders in the US. And really, that's been the majority of my career, was working for large production home builders. And most of my career was really focused on the customer experience. But what was cool about that is being at the very end of a whole process is I could look back through and say, hey, we've got some holes missing here. We have some processes that need to be either created or fixed. So I did a lot of process improvement, and that naturally led to me doing training and development, which was my most recent role in corporate America, was the National Director of Training and Development. So a lot of technical training, also cultural training, leadership training, which is some of the things that I'm really passionate about, is leadership. And so I actually stepped away from my corporate role and started my own business, and primarily was working with women, helping them to rise in their careers and to really gain leadership skills to do so. And that's how you and I met, Todd, having that background in home building. And then, of course, working with women specifically, that's where we met and were able to be on a podcast together. Still do some of that, but was fortunate enough to join your team with you, Todd, 2 months ago. And really my role here is to have a great customer experience for every single one of our clients. And it's been really fun to get to marry some of my passions in leadership and training and things that just come really natural to me, as well as with this experience and being in the industry. So it's been a fun ride with you so far, and I'm excited and looking forward to a lot more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting story how the opportunity presented itself and how it all worked out. It was fun how that came together. So you mentioned you've spent a lot of time as a woman in the male dominated construction industry, which I'm not sure how I feel about that term. And then you've also worked with women. What's some advice, a couple of tips you would give to women who are maybe early in their career in the construction industry specifically? What advice would you have for ladies in that situation?
Well, I would say first off, yes, it's a male-dominated industry, but I do think things are changing. There's a lot more awareness about everything, really. And I see, I had a lot of obstacles in my career, but I saw these as coaching opportunities, because I truly believe most people are good people. They don't intend to be doing or saying things that are harmful to anyone else. They just they're not aware. And so that's one thing I would recommend to any women who are going into whatever male-dominated industry it may be. Just be really open about things. Don't take things so personally, and let people know, hey, when you said such and such, or when you did such and such, it made me think this or feel this. Was that your intent? Very non-threatening, but it's a good opportunity for someone to look at that and go, oh my goodness, maybe that behavior wasn't so good, and I had a lot of those experiences, and with men that were really great friends and mentors that I respected highly, and I knew they respected me, but there were just little things that would happen from time to time they weren't even aware of. So had I gotten really upset and angry and combative about it, that wouldn't have gone so well. But for me to be able to approach it in a way where I could coach them and say, hey, maybe not such a good way to approach that in the future. And I promise you they would not be doing that again, right? After I bring some of those things up. So that's the first thing, is be really open about things and use them as coaching opportunities. And the second thing, know your job well. Be smart and be an expert in what it is that you're doing. And you will be very respected by your colleagues. I have found that I have to, within my career in home building, I had to kind of prove myself a little bit more maybe than some of my male colleagues, but it's okay, because I learned a lot, and look at where I've been in my career because of that knowledge and that experience. And it also set me apart, if you will, many times from my colleagues, but I just invested in that knowledge and in that experience, and I did the hard work that I needed to.
Right on. So let's jump into the topic we want to talk about today, which is we'll get into something similar to growing pains. We found this interesting. We had an interesting experience with a group of construction business owners about a month ago at a live meetup, and ran into some fears, some growing fears. We'll talk about that. Talk about some strategies to combat those fears and deal with them. But here's the first question I'd like to start off with. I've heard you say that sometimes construction business owners, maybe entrepreneurs, maybe more generally all of us, we are our own worst enemy, and we get in our own way.
Yes.
How do business owners tend to get in their own way?
Well, I appreciate that you said it's probably everyone, because it is everyone. But I will say, having been a high-performing individual as well as an entrepreneur myself, there's a lot of insecurities that come along with that, right? A lot of fears and a lot of unknown. And so because of that, given where your mindset is, if it's not in the right space and if you're not regularly visiting that, those fears can grow really big. And we can be either our biggest detriment, or we can be, what is the word I wrote down here? We can be our greatest asset, or we can be our greatest detriment. And it really boils down to us and what it is that we believe, and what it is, the actions that we're doing, and the things that we are striving for. So I know every single person who's listening to this can relate to that. You know that many times you've gotten in your own way because of some of your fears, or, these are hot topics and words these days, but triggers and things like that. We all have them. And we all have things that have happened to us in the past that we're now pulling into our current situations that oftentimes block us from moving forward. And I think, especially for a business owner, and especially when you are leading others, that gets compounded because it's not just you anymore. There's other people that are on this train. And if you happen to mess it up, others' lives are at stake, right? So a lot of that just gets really, it gets big and it gets kind of scary sometimes.
Yeah. It seems like you mentioned top performers or high achievers. It seems like that's a double-edged sword. I have this conversation quite a bit with people who, from the outside, have achieved great success, great business. Maybe they are living what would be a dream for thousands of people. They've achieved this level of success, but they're just not happy. And they are frustrated. Sometimes they're in a funk. And it seems like this thing that drives them to be a top performer can also be the double-edged sword. And it just causes them to never be happy. And they struggle with the perfectionism, or maybe it's the inner critic saying, yeah, but you could do more, or you should be more disciplined, or you should be further along than you are, or look at this other person who's further along than you. They're comparing themselves to this fictional reality or this other person who's in a completely different situation. You're a high achiever. Is that something that you deal with? Like, do you hear that inner critic voice? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. In fact, this is a conversation I was just having with my boyfriend the other day. No matter how well I do on anything, I'm always saying, oh man, I probably could have done this better. I might have changed this little thing here and it would have been a little bit better than that. So it's kind of something that's constantly in my brain. And I'm also very much a perfectionist. So I like things to be really good. But the challenge that comes with that, first of all, we're shooting all over ourselves. And that's not helpful for anything, right? All of these shoulds that we should have been doing, or should have done better, or should have done like this person. Does it really get us anywhere? No. I think for myself, and also being a coach and having done a lot of personal development, it's finding the right harmony. I love to use the word harmony versus balance, because if you think about balance, I know many of you have seen like some of those variety shows in the past where they're trying to spin all the plates on a little stick. You know what I'm talking about? That means you have to give equal attention to everything all the time, or stuff starts to fall. That's not realistic in life. We can't balance everything, but what we can do is find harmony, which means if you think about a symphony, there's hundreds of instruments being played, and each of them has a different part and different amount that they're playing at certain times, but they're not all playing at the same amount and at the same time. And at the end, you have a beautiful symphony. I think that is a concept to take into every part of our life. And specifically to what you're talking about right here, it's finding the harmony between pushing ourselves and doing the best that we can, and also appreciating where we're at and being okay with it, right? And far too many of us are either living too much in the past or too worried about the future. Very few of us can stay right here, right now. Now, that's also a hard thing for a high achiever to understand, because they are goal-driven and they're forward thinkers, right? And they begin with the end in mind, and right to left thinking that you talk a lot about, Todd. Those are really good things. But if we get too far into that to where we're constantly, again, shooting all over ourselves, it's not going to benefit us. So it's finding this right mix of being driven and having goals and pushing ourselves, but also appreciating where we're at and what it is that we've done and what we've accomplished.
Yeah, it's one thing that I learned the hard way about 7 years ago. Up until that point, I had always put happiness on the other side of achievement. When I start my business, when I make this big get this big promotion, when I sign this big contract, when I get the raise, when I something out in the future, then I'll be happy. And I passed a lot of those milestones and I wasn't happy. And in fact, one situation actually really kind of scared me into making a change. I was on the way back from Chicago. I had just met with the owners of a real estate firm that I was working for, and they had given me a big bonus that was actually 50% more than what I had even expected. It was huge. And I was driving back from Chicago and I was frustrated. And I was like, what is wrong with me? This is what I've been hoping for the last year. What the hell is wrong with me? And I realized that I had put happiness on the other side of achievement, and it wasn't there. And that was frustrating. And I think a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people who do the same. And I think a lot of people do it on a macro scale with their career. They think, when I retire, when I get the kids out of the house, or when I achieve a certain bank account balance, then I'll be happy. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't seem to work that way all the time.
No, it doesn't. And what you'll find, and I'm sure maybe you've experienced this, Todd, I know a lot of people who are listening I have certainly, if we can't quite get that stuff right, if we can't get our mindset in a good space, if we can't be okay with life as it is and be happy with life as it is, the situation may change, the players may change, the environment may change, but nothing really changes, right? You get that new job, but everything's still the same. You move into that new house, but everything's still the same. So nothing is really truly going to shift for you unless you can get this stuff right and this stuff right? It's kind of that connection between the brain and the heart that is really what matters.
Yeah, I realize that happiness is an inside job. It's
100%.
something you need to be happy. And actually, achievement follows happiness. When you're happy and content and grateful, then you get all that head junk taken care of and things just sort of take care of themselves. But if you try it the other way around, it just doesn't seem to work.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll add one more thing to that. And I know a lot of people may say this is woo-woo, that like we draw things to us. But everybody has done this, where you've woken up and you're like, today is going to be a great day. It's going to be a good day. And you start off with that attitude. What kind of day do you have? You have a good day, right? So we really, truly get to create the life that we want. It's just how committed are you to that? And it's not something that is one and done. It takes continual practice. And the things that we're talking about right now, they really do filter out into every part of our life. So I know we're going to dig into a business owner and construction business owners, but all of this really is applicable, and it's applicable to everything.
Yeah. I read a quote a few years ago, and it was something to the effect of every man is a self-made man, but only the successful admit it. So if you're not successful, it's your fault. If you are successful, it's your fault. Yeah. And I completely agree that what you put out there into the world comes back to you. And if you only see the negative, that's what will come back to you. I've been reading I don't even know how old this book of essays from Ralph Waldo Emerson is, but he talks about the law of compensation. And, what you give, you receive, sow and you'll reap. What you focus on, you'll get more of. To some, that sounds a little woo-woo, but that concept of sowing and reaping it's in business books today, whether it's Gary Vaynerchuk, Jab, Jab, Right Hook, The Go-Giver, Servant Leadership from Dave Ramsey, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Bible. It's everywhere because it's true. It's the universal truth, a lot like gravity or other concepts like compound interest. It's just a principle that works. And if you're on the wrong side of it, it works against you. But if you get on the right side of it, it works for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love what you said in that quote, Todd. I think that's what's hard, especially when people have difficult circumstances in life. And we all do. Let's not fool ourselves that we think we're the only ones, right? All of us have things that are hard. Life is not easy for anyone. We don't get off this crazy planet without having some kind of trial. But what is really hard is when things happen and we don't own our part in it. Now, I'm not discounting the fact that people do really crappy things to each other, right? I'm not discounting the fact that that has happened to people. But what are you going to do about it now? That's where we get to take that ownership. You're either a victim in every situation, or you have that ownership and you create your situation. So again, we don't need to dive too deep into that, but I love what you said about that. Like when you're successful, a lot of us want to take the credit, but when things aren't going so great, we don't want to take the credit, and it's just the same. Yeah. It's always about us.
It is. And that's, as I tell people, the good news is you are your biggest problem. And the bad news is you are your biggest problem. But the good news is that's one person you should have some measure of control over. Yep. Yeah. So let's talk about this live meetup that we had in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at this miserable location called Margaritaville, right on the beach. Actually,
terrible.
It was terrible. So we had a group of construction business owners that we work with, and we did a hackathon where we talked about a problem, big painful problem. The group voted on these problems, and this hackathon went in a completely different direction than I expected, and I think it surprised everybody there. The problem that we were addressing was, how do we attract and retain top talent, right? And I was prepared for answers to get into how do we recruit, how do we put together job descriptions, like blocking and tackling type stuff, and how do we go find these people? Is it Indeed? Is it ZipRecruiter? Is it a headhunter? But it went in a completely different direction. And we ended up writing, I was standing at the easel pad writing these things down, and I had like 2 pages of fears. And it became apparent that the biggest problem when it came to small business owners growing their team, growing their business, it was pretty fascinating that it was fear. Mm-hmm. And what was pretty interesting was how transparent this group was, who had been working together for a month or 2, maybe 3 months in that case, during a challenge. But let's talk about some of these fears that came up. One of them is what is known as imposter syndrome. And this fear exhibits something like this. There's this overwhelming, maybe not overwhelming, but it's a chronic fear that one day somebody's going to open the door, point their finger in your face and say, you have no idea what you're doing. Who the hell do you think you are? You have no business running a company or managing a project or whatever the case may be. But there's this imposter syndrome, that it's this deep fear that at some point we're going to be found out to be a fraud. Mm-hmm. Now, I know I've dealt with this. Apparently, it's almost universal. I've met a few people who didn't deal with it. Maybe they may have been sociopaths. I'm not sure. But this imposter syndrome was pretty prevalent, and it showed up in a few different ways. What did you think about that?
Well, just to back up a little bit, to kind of set the stage with this, this is a room full of 12 guys or so. So this is a room full of 12 business owners, alpha males, construction business owners, tough guys, right? And it was like almost this magical moment where every one of them was super vulnerable. And we started out kind of listing off a few of these things in relation to manpower and building a team. And as they started going through some of these things, the root just kept pointing us back to fear. And so it was really this cool moment where everyone got really vulnerable and really honest with what it was that was really plaguing them, I guess you could say, as a business owner. And the magic, I'll bring that up and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but where we were able to get with this in this conversation. But it was very interesting to see that happen. And two reasons why I think that happened. Number one, because you had built a community, right? And these people had had the chance to get to know one another, which I think is one of the greatest benefits of something like this. They have their peers who are in the same boat as them, but they're not their competition. So now they have someone who can truly understand. And for anyone who has been a business owner or even just in this industry, it's really hard to talk to your spouse or to your friends or anyone else who's doing anything else because it's just not the same. But to have someone that you can call who's doing the same thing you are and dealing with the same things you are is pretty cool. So all of that just to say that that was part of what made this possible, was for all of them having that network and knowing that they could trust each other. So they were vulnerable in sharing these fears. Now to answer your question, going into the imposter syndrome, every single person deals with this. I think you're right when you say you must be a sociopath, if not, because it's human nature to feel this way. I've done a few presentations on this, and many of you may know the author, Maya Angelou. I think she's written 7 books, and she has said that every single time she publishes a new book, she's like, this is it. They're going to find me out. This time they're going to find me out. And even Albert Einstein, who, he's famously known as the most intelligent man in the world. And I forget his exact quote, but very much kind of the same thing, like now they're going to find me out. And I think that is, if you think about, none of us want to feel like we're in that naked state where everyone's like, oh, I got you. I see you. You're not really here. You don't belong here. What business do you have to be here? And yet one of the things that I think is very interesting is if you think of some of the greatest leaders in the world, which I promise you, they've all felt that way. No one has ever done what they've done before. And so in some sense, they are an imposter. They're stepping into this new world and this new situation that no one has ever dealt with before. And so, yeah, every single one of us who lead and lead well, we are in a sense an imposter, but that's where you truly get to step in to being that leader and truly get to step into, instead of running and cowering from those fears, you lean into them. And so that, I think, just kind of realizing that you might feel that way, but every single person who's done something great has felt that way.
And I think the other sneaky part of imposter syndrome, which is exaggerated by social media today, is it will tell you you're a fraud. Somebody's going to find out. And it also says, and look at everybody else. They have it all figured out. Their business is clearly better than yours, and you should probably hang it up. Yeah. So there was another theme of fears that came up that I've heard. It's been a consistent thread through the people I've worked with over the past few years. And I would summarize it as new employees are a threat. And what it sounds like is, well, what if I hire this person and then I train them so well and then they become the competition? Or what if I hire this person and they come in and I show them my financials and then they use that against me? Or what if this mysterious person, this new person comes in and they wreck our culture? Or all of these what if scenarios. And basically it's saying new people bad, new employees bad, and change bad. That's like in caveman speak. But there's this pervasive fear that new employees are a threat to the organization. Have you seen that? Does that sound consistent with what you've seen?
Yes, absolutely. And I think taking it a step further, this is innate and in who we are as humans. Our brains are designed to keep us safe, right? And so something new is scary because we don't know what it is. And in fact, any type of psychological study that you will find, you'll learn that most of us are more comfortable staying in something that really sucks versus moving into something new. simply because we know what this is, right? We know what this situation is right here. And so I think that same concept happens when we're talking about building and growing a business and potentially bringing new people in. That's the unknown, and that's fearful, and that's scary. And so I think a lot of people would rather sit here in this seat where they're wearing a million hats and they're working 80 hours a week, and they have no time for a life outside of it, because at least I know this and I can control this, right? Instead of bringing someone new in who could be a threat or who could be whatever the case may be. But talking about that concept we had earlier where we get to create our situation, what if you just flip it and expect that this is going to be a good thing? It's going to free up your time. You're going to hire the best people. You are creating intentionally a really great culture. And at the core of all of this, the foundation of all of this is trust, right? And that's another conversation I'm sure we'll jump into at some point. But I personally feel like all great leaders, the foundation of leadership is trust. And trust is not just something that you get, you have to give it too. You want to think about it as an exchange. And when you're not willing to extend trust, you can't expect to get trust back. So it goes both ways. And I think that's just one of those things is, do you trust yourself enough to know that you can lead a team into movement and in a positive way? Do you trust yourself enough to know that even if maybe something bad does happen, that you know you can handle it? There's a lot of ways that you can view this and see this. And I think sometimes we get really caught up in blowing something up into a bigger issue than it is. And even that day, we kind of took it down into some of these very simple questions that you can ask yourself, or have someone, a trusted guide or coach or friend, ask you these questions that takes this huge problem and brings it all the way down into something that's like, it's not really a thing at all. That's a misconception or a misbelief on my part. So what can I choose to believe otherwise?
Absolutely. And we'll talk about some of those. How do you extend trust? What are some ways you can systematize trust? And when it comes to trusting yourself, that ties into the next couple. One of the other pervasive fears sounds something like, what if I make a mistake and I hire the wrong person? What if I have poor judgment? What if I hire the wrong person again? A lot of us have made bad hires in the past. We've been burned. We've had the toxic person. We've had the business partner who's come in and stolen money, or the employee who has come in and caused all sorts of turmoil. So we think, what if I make a mistake and hire the wrong person again? And they wreck the culture, they cause more problems. And then the easy answer is, like you said, let's just sit here in this mess, because at least I know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think a question to ask yourself is, how's that working for you? How is your current state and what you're choosing to do right now? How's that working for you? And I think most of us would admit, okay, this isn't actually working that great. And so it's taking that leap of faith, and it's taking that chance on ourselves. And by the way, newsflash, you're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and that is how we learn the most. And sometimes mistakes are costly, but it's okay. Like everything, this is not a real word, but I made it up. Everything is figure outable. We can figure out everything, right? And I think not being flippant and unwise about the decisions you're making, you need to go into things in a smart way, and having done your homework and do things very, oh goodness, I'm thinking the word, but you want to be wise about the decisions you're making, but you got to move forward. And I think having, again, going back to what we said earlier, you can also create those scenarios. If you've come from a place where it was a traumatic experience for you, no matter what we're talking about, but in this scenario, let's say you had a horrible employee that created a toxic environment or cost you money or whatever the case may be, that's something that you're like, I don't want that to happen ever again. But if that is the pervasive emotion and feeling and thought behind you moving forward with hiring someone else, how much more likely is it that you're going to almost create that same scenario, right? And not to say that you're specifically seeking that out, but our brains are also designed to see certain things. Our brains can only accept so much information at a time. So the way to explain this is, if you bought a new car anytime you're out in the market for a new car, you start seeing that same car everywhere, right? There wasn't a huge influx of that vehicle suddenly. It's just that your brain was more aware of it. And we can do the same thing as we're moving through some of these things that are a little bit scary, is if you're setting yourself up to say, this is going to be terrible, we're going to have a horrible employee come in, guess what? That's what you're going to see. You're going to only see the negative. But if you can shift that and believe that you're going to see something good and something positive, and you're going to have a positive result, you'll start seeing proof of that. So again, we hold a lot more power than we ever give ourselves credit for, and on one side or the other, whether that's a success or not.
Yeah, good stuff. The next fear that came up was maybe tied to imposter syndrome, but it was, what if I don't have the chops to lead a team at all? I've been a one-person show, been wearing all the hats. What if I just don't have what it takes to lead a team? What if I don't have what it takes to lead a team of some magical number that is set in your head? Or this one is really interesting, which is, what if I don't have what it takes to lead up? What if I need to hire somebody who's better at selling or project management or estimating or marketing than I am, but what if I hire them and they realize they're better than me? And there's all of these what ifs that pop up. So being able to lead a team of people who are smarter than you, better than you, and that can become I'm confident that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that you have to be the best in your organization, or you have to be the smartest, or you have to be the only person in your organization who can do something, then you will never be able to retain somebody who is smarter or better, or can also do what you do, because you will run them off. You will repel them. But this is an interesting one, because it keeps a mediocre team. It keeps people surrounded by a mediocre team. So yep. If that's your mindset, if you're afraid of hiring somebody better than you, and let's say you're a 7 at project management or an 8 at selling, you won't go hire a 9 or a 10. Mm-hmm. And you will continually hire people who are 4s and 5s, not knowing it, but that's what you'll do. And that's how you get in your way, because of that mindset. What do you think about that?
Oh my gosh. I had a million things running through my mind as you were sharing all of that, Todd. I think the first thing is ask yourself if you're willing to let go of your ego, because really everything you just explained is hugely driven by ego. If you can't accept the fact that there will be people who are better than you, and guess what, you do have weaknesses, you're never going to move forward, and you won't excel. You just won't. And we know the very smartest and best leaders are those who surround themselves with people who are better than them. I know in my own entrepreneurial journey, there are certain parts of business that I do not like doing, let alone just not good at. But I'm smart enough to know I'm going to hire someone else who can do that better than me, right? It's kind of, if you understand what your greatest strengths are as a leader, as a business owner, whatever the case may be, stay in your lane of strengths. But because businesses require more than what one person can do, whether that's a capacity issue with time or just skill level or strengths, you're going to have to build a team around that, right? So stay in your lane of what you're really good at. And by the way, things you enjoy doing, and find people who can help you with those other pieces that you have to be successful in your business. But don't just fill those spaces with people who, like you said, are mediocre. Find the best. And by the way, if you're bringing them in and letting them know, hey, Todd, I suck at finances and you are a rock star, I'm really going to lean on you for this. Think of how much different that relationship is going to be versus you constantly putting, Todd, I don't know if you really are doing this right, or, constantly questioning that person or trying to push them down below you. how's that going to work out? You're going to lose that rock star, number one. And number two, your insecurities are just going to continue to be heightened. So, going back to what I said first, let's get rid of that ego and be willing to admit that you can't do everything and that you're not great at everything. Know what your greatest strengths are and what you like to do, stay in that lane, and then find the best people around you and build them up. Because I think you had mentioned this too, like there's this fear of, well, what if I hire all these great people and I train them and I groom them and then they leave? Well, what if you don't train them and groom them? They're still working for you. There is a possibility that they will leave. But guess what? If you're building a really great business and a great culture and people see that, they want to work for you. So maybe you will lose some people. Maybe you won't. Maybe they're going to be so happy with what you've created and how you treat them and just the respect and value that you see in them, that they're not going to want to go anywhere. And by the way, if they do go somewhere for a better opportunity, shouldn't you feel pretty dang good that you helped create that for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I did when I brought you onto the team. Like, I'm gonna get a rock star, and great advice.
Thank you.
Here is another one that I hear, especially in the last couple of years. The construction industry is incredibly strong. The demand is outpacing supply. At least most of the people we work with don't struggle with sales. Their struggle usually sounds something like, there is a giant wave of opportunity in front of me. I want to capitalize on it. I don't want to miss out on this wave, because a lot of them have survived the 2008 recession. Some have been around since the 80s and they've gone through 3 recessions. But it's usually, there's a consistent theme of, I need to grow the business to take care of this opportunity. In some cases, it's a longer term fear. I hear this occasionally from people who've been in the business, say 20 years, and they say things like, I don't want to get to the end of my career. I don't want to do this for 30, 35 years and then look back and have regrets and realize, man, I missed it. I could have done more. I missed this opportunity. But there's this fear of, what if I try to grow? What if I try to get in front of this wave of opportunity and I fail? Mm-hmm. What if I try to grow the team, do all of these things, bring in people, put systems in place? We're not talking about scaling up 10x, but what if we go from $10 million a year to $20 million a year, or $10 million to $40 million a year? But what if I do that and I fail and I overwhelm my people, and my good people who've been with me for a long time leave? Or I have a great reputation, we've been at this for a while, and we try to grow and our customer experience goes down, and it actually hurts our reputation. So what if we do this? We push for a year or two to grow, and then we end up going backwards. That's a big pervasive fear, which will obviously keep you stuck. Because if you look at growth opportunity, if you look at growth as bad, growth means more headaches. Growth means a risk of losing our people. If you look at it as growth is a risk of diminishing our reputation, losing market share, then you're going to be pretty reluctant to even try it. Certainly going to find a lot of excuses not to do it. What do you think?
You said the beginning of a couple of phrases there, what if? And I think that is I like that question. I encourage a lot of clients to think about that. But the problem is, a lot of us are thinking, what if in the negative? And what if all of these bad things happened? Could you maybe use that question to ask about all the good things that could happen? So again, like, let's get your mindset in the right space. Let's get your trajectory going in a positive direction, first of all. And then from there, I think there's a few things, as you were mentioning that, which, you and I are creating and helping business owners right now to use. But one of the first things is, what is your vision? And if you are very clear on what your vision is as a business owner, which I want to clarify that and jump in here with me too, Todd, if you don't mind. But a vision for your business, you own that. As a business owner, that is yours. This is where we're headed with our business. These are the things that I want everyone to experience when they're working with us, whether that's an employee or a customer. It's essentially everything that you see and that you visualize and where you want to go. But the way you get there, you can involve other people in, right? But at the end of the day, you're the leader. So what is your vision? And I think that really helps to direct and guide things. And you've been really good at that in the business that you've been building, with having the goal and the vision of freedom, impact, and wealth, right? And so that drives every single decision you make. When you have that really clear and you're moving into this place where you want to grow, when you revisit that every time you're making a decision, you're going to stay on target, right? I think it's when we have a lot of opportunity pop up, or a lot of things just are falling on our plate and we're trying to decide what's best for us. When we get a little overwhelmed with that, we just start throwing darts in the dark. That's not so great. But if you're very intentional about some of those decisions based on your vision, you're going to be moving in the right direction. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is the cliche quote of, if you plan to fail, you fail to plan, right? How are you planning for that growth? And a big part of that is having systems and processes in place behind the scenes that things are just running really well. Everybody understands very clearly what their role is. Everyone understands what they're accountable for. Everybody understands how things work and every step along the way for every part of your business. These are all kind of the behind the scenes things that once you get those dialed in, then it becomes front scene for your customers. Now they understand what kind of experience they're getting with you, and you're knocking it out of the park every time. Not only are you building a beautiful quality product that you're delivering to them, but their whole experience in working with you is positive. And you have nothing but a raving fan at the end, over and over again. But you can't truly grow and scale unless you have some of these things in place, which is a lot of what we're able to do in working with business owners and helping them to get a lot of this in place. And by the way, you probably have a lot of it already in place, but is it documented? Does your team understand it? How well is everyone trained? Is it running fluidly, or are there missing pieces and parts that need to be fixed or created, if you will?
Yeah, I think what you said about having a vision is important. What we've been talking about, these fears, I think reflects how a lot of people look at the future, and they're really clear on what they don't want, right? It's I don't want to grow my team and fail. I don't want to hire a bad employee. I don't want to ruin the reputation. Everybody's clear on what they don't want. But that's not a vision. I'm not sure what that is, but it's not a vision. And one of the hardest questions to answer is, what do you want? Where do you want to be? What is your vision? And that's really hard. It's surprisingly hard to answer the question. All right, if you could design your lifestyle and your business and your impact on the people around you just the way you want it, what do you want? And it seems like, I could do that in a heartbeat. But we've taken so many people through this strategic planning, vision process. It's hard because it's much easier just to react to something and say, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. But what do you want? And I think it's incredibly important. And this topic of how do I articulate my vision is one that we've been talking about with clients a lot recently. I'm not sure why that is, but it's incredibly important to know, where are you going and why are you doing it? I think of your vision as why does your business exist? What impact do you have on the people around you, your customers, your employees, trade partners, suppliers, the community? Why are you doing this? If it's just to pay bills month to month, that's sort of like having a really nice truck and just driving from gas station to gas station, filling it up, just back and forth. That's, if you saw somebody doing that for 2 weeks at a time, you'd be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, well, I've got this truck, I've got to keep it gassed up. Where are you going? Why are you doing this? And it's incredibly important to have a vision. And I think that's where it really starts, is what do you want? So let's talk about some other strategies. Let's talk about some things that can help with the mindset stuff. If the problem is between our ears, then what are a few practical strategies that you could share with folks?
This is actually going to go in line with, I want to backtrack just a little bit, as you were talking about all of us typically know what we don't want. And this is going to lead into the question you just asked me. I think understanding what we don't want is good. Like if you think about a bowling alley, and you guys probably have all taken younger children to a bowling alley, so they have the bumper lanes, right? And if you see them, they don't really know what they're doing. They just toss the ball down and the ball bounces back and forth between these two bumpers. But eventually it gets to the end and usually something gets hit, right? That's kind of like understanding what our don'ts are. We have these lanes and we're kind of figuring out and navigating where we want to go. Those don'ts are really important because it gives us those parameters and their boundaries. But you don't want to dwell in the don't, because again, that's a negative, right? But what you can do is you can take those don'ts and you can reframe them. So I don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. Okay, I do want to be wealthy. I don't want to fail at hiring horrible employees. I hire only the best, most loyal employees, whatever the case may be. So part of and this answers now your question of between the ears, right? If we're constantly dwelling and we're in this don't place or this negative place, you're not really going to progress. But if you can shift those things into a positive statement and state it in the present, you're going to be pulling things a lot quicker to you, right? So I want employees that are loyal and the very best at what they do. You still push that out, right? So I have employees that are loyal and the very best at what they do. So these are just a few things. I know, again, a lot of this sounds maybe woo-woo or silly, but it's real stuff, right? How are you talking to yourself? And what are the things that you're saying? And how positive are those things? And how quickly are you drawing positivity to you? If you're constantly saying negative things up here, it's all you're going to get in the reality, right? And so one thing I like to actually talk to my clients a lot about, I call it a leadership of one. And I really believe that if we can't lead ourselves well, it's going to be really hard for us to lead others well. And so it is that whole concept of what's between your ears. And that is, there's so many different aspects that go into that. And I believe every person is going to find and align with what works best for them. But a few things I would mention is having a solid routine. Because having a solid routine kind of hits on a bunch of different things, right? You're doing things physically. So you're hitting that physical part of your world and your existence. Then you're using that mental space. So you're being smart about the things that you're doing mentally. Then there's the spirituality, which is stillness or connecting to a higher source or whatever the case may be for you. And then physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Emotional. Then how do you feel? What are the feelings that you are currently feeling, and what do you want to feel? So I call those the 4 bodies. And I try to create a routine for myself in the morning and in the evening that tries to hit at least one of those, or each one of those, excuse me. And what that does for you is it gets you into a space where you are setting yourself for the greatest success. But what this is asking of you is to be determined and to be disciplined. And if you can be determined and disciplined with yourself, you're going to be in a space where you can lead others well. So along with that, I want to also mention, and all of you I'm sure have heard this, but some of the highest performers, again, we're using that word, some of the highest performers are voracious readers and learners. They're constantly reading. They're constantly learning. I think I read an article the other day that was talking about some of the wealthiest men and women in the world, and they spend an average of 5 hours a week reading. They don't watch TV. They're either listening to podcasts or audiobooks, or they're reading an average of 1 hour a day for those 5 work days. Okay. So there's a mental space. You could check that right off. You're doing something that's helping you learn and to grow, because you're not going to go from here to here unless you're educating yourself and you're learning. And there's so many ways we can do that today. There's really no excuse for us not to learn something, right? So that's one thing I would mention. The other thing is be physically active, take care of your body, because if you can't have a healthy, strong body that feels good, you're not going to perform well. And that doesn't need to look like running a marathon. It's whatever's right for you, but getting consistent in what some of those routines are. So just to give you an example for myself, I wake up in the morning and I drink water, very first thing. It's the first thing I do. And then I spend time with God, which is what I call it. So I do some meditation, I do some prayer, I do some pondering on gratitude, things of that nature. I try to read every day. I move my body every day. And I know I love food. I love it. But I know if I eat pretty clean most of the time, I feel good. So I allow myself to enjoy, but I'm also setting myself up for greatest success. And if I do these things consistently, I feel really good and I can show up as my best self. So that's me leading myself well. Now I can show up and lead others well. It's that whole concept of like the air mask in the plane. They tell you to put yours on first, because what will happen is if you don't and it jumps down in elevation, you'll lose consciousness and then you're no good to anybody. So the same concepts apply to all of us. We want to show up as our best selves all the time. And we do that by taking care of ourselves and leading ourselves well. So those are just a few things. I feel like I kind of went a little bit everywhere with that, Todd, but that's my initial response.
That's great. I completely agree about gratitude. I strongly recommend everybody spend 5-10 minutes a day writing down things you're grateful for. Not like, well, I'm going to sit here in a state of gratitude. Okay, maybe, but spend 5 or 10 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. I've had this conversation with people who actively resisted it, got frustrated. Like, why are we talking about gratitude? I have real business problems. I have cash flow issues. I have these real problems. And we're talking about this out there stuff. But then after they did it, they realized, I get it. Mm-hmm. I realize that I have to, there's a statement, a quote from Wayne Dyer, who said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at begin to change. And that's what gratitude does for you. It's like a lens that you pick up and look at the world through. And it changes, not only does it change the way you look at things, but things actually begin to change, including your brain.
Yes.
It's pretty fascinating how it changes your brain. So I really like this idea of taking care of yourself. In order to lead a team, you need to take care of yourself. And I hear a lot of people who aren't doing this. I've spoken with several recently. We're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Stress levels are high. Diet's not good, not exercising. So this is a little counterintuitive, but start by taking care of yourself, because if you're not good, then if you're not good for yourself, you're not going to be good for your team.
Yeah.
And so gratitude, I think, is huge. One of the things I recommend and encourage people to do is catch people on your team doing things right. I like to ask for team wins. So I would encourage you to spend some time looking for what people did right. Try to catch people doing a good job. If you lead a team, let them know, look for things they did well and tell them. In construction, we're all about punch lists and auditing and looking for deficiencies. And most of us have a finely tuned sense for finding things that are wrong. But you need to finely tune that sense for finding things that are going well. And then, just like you said, with seeing that car, suddenly there's this mass influx of people driving cars just like yours. The more you look for things, the more you'll see them. And that will change as well. And then when it comes to the fear of leading up, imposter syndrome, I think a lot of it comes down to transparency. Mm-hmm. Just punching that right in the face and saying, look, I don't know everything. I suck at this. That's why you're here. And letting people know, yeah, I'm no good. I'm a big picture guy, or I'm a details girl, or I'm not great at numbers, or I'm great at this, but you're so much better. When you tell people, hey, you are so much better than I am, or you're doing such a great job at this, that I think that transparency keeps that imposter syndrome and that fear in check. And then let's talk about some systems and processes that we can put in place, especially for those who are either dealing with that wave of growth currently and dealing with the chaos, or it's coming. They can see this wave coming, realizing we have more backlog than ever under contract, or I have all of these projects under pre-construction agreements that are coming and I have no idea how we're going to build them, or I can see it coming and I need to get ready. There are really a few things to plan for the future. I think you mentioned that one of the keys is have a plan. Don't just try things, little one-off things, because you don't want to spend 2 years, 3 years trying things by trial and error. So there are a few specific things that we found to be very successful. Number one is to design your organization for the future. Start with the vision. Where do you want to be 2 years from now? And then design what that organization looks like. How many projects do you think you'll be doing? What does your revenue look like? What does your organization look like? We encourage and teach people how to develop an accountability chart that says, this is what our business looks like. This is what the functions are. And this is what those functions, those roles are responsible for in the future. And then one of the biggest things, especially for small businesses, is get it out of your head. Get it out of your head. Processes for estimating, selling, negotiating, building, quality control. If everything is in your head, you will absolutely suffer if you hire people on your team. So getting it out of your head is a big one. Clearly defining roles and responsibilities. Who does what? Who's accountable for these results? Think about it as delegating results instead of firing off tasks to a whole bunch of people. And then put together a plan, a financial plan that answers the question, what would it take if I need to hire 3 project managers, 2 superintendents, and somebody to head up my finance department in the next 2 years? Wouldn't it be great to have a plan? A financial plan that says, okay, well, plan number one that says, this is the order that we're going to hire these people in. This is what they'll be responsible for. And then this is what we need to do from a revenue and gross profit standpoint in order to support that extra overhead. It takes we had one of our clients who uses the revenue maximizer tool said, the revenue maximizer helps me sleep at night because it answers the question, how am I going to do this? What's it going to take to make things work? So let's talk about the Systematize Your Construction Business program that you are leading right now. We've got a small group of construction business owners going through it, and they're seeing some great results. Frankly, some of the results that we've seen have surprised me a little bit. What are some examples of the results that you've been seeing?
I would say probably one of the biggest things that we're hearing from our clients so far is this clarity, right? Getting it out of your head. Having them do these specific exercises that help them to visualize things in the future, to have a bigger picture and a bigger dream of what it could be, and then identifying who's responsible for what. And I like how you said you delegate responsibility, or excuse me, was it results? Delegate results. That's huge because then your people take ownership for what they're doing instead of just checking off tasks. But helping them to get these things organized and to visualize and see what maybe they had in their head, but they weren't really clear on it. Now they have it all out on paper, right? And not just what they had in their head, but they're involving their teams, which is getting everybody excited because they're seeing, oh my gosh, there's something going on here and I get to be a part of it. They're pulling their best people in, they're pulling in their whole team and saying, what does it look like? What is this current process like right now? where's the chaos? Where's the triple work or the double work going on that 3 people are handling and only one should be? So it's giving like this fresh new sense of hope and excitement, not just for the business owner, but for the whole team, of future pacing and seeing where things are going and realizing that, hey, I can take ownership for this. And everybody knows that when you have ownership for something and when you are working at it, you feel good. It's just the natural product of it. It's human nature, right? And so as a business leader, and again, leading a team well, you're allowing them to have that ownership to help create it. And when they are creating all of that, they do have ownership in it, right? They're much more likely to do it than if you show up and say, hey, this is what you're going to do, go do it. Nobody likes that. So yeah, I think just that overall awareness of things that maybe they thought they knew, but they weren't sure, or things they didn't know at all, gaining greater clarity, and then getting things really organized. So they have this plan that they can now perform to. It just is helping things to run a little bit smoother, like a well-oiled machine all the way around for them. It is, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It's a little bit of work up front, but it is worth it. And once those things are in place, your business is different. And some of the things that we're hearing from these guys is how they're not as frustrated and there's not so much chaos. And like you said, they can sleep at night. It's a different realm entirely. And if you're in that space where you're feeling super chaotic and overwhelmed and you're working these crazy hours and you have no quality of life, this is something you really want to look at because it will change everything for you.
Yeah. We just had a group call yesterday talking specifically about financial systems, which is a substantial part of the Systematize Your Construction Business program. And I asked the question, what does this mean for you, having these systems in place? And there were 2 words that came up. One was confidence. Having good systems in place, specifically financial systems, means confidence. And the other was freedom, or I think it was liberating, knowing that I had my numbers dialed in. I have good financial systems. I have good bookkeeping in place. It was so liberating for some folks. So yeah, clarity, confidence, being liberated or freedom from these things, sleeping well at night. One of the things that continues to surprise me is the effect on the team, right? I think a lot of our clients come in and they're really focused on rightfully so, getting things out of their head, getting systems put in place, and they're surprised by the effect on their team, the ripple effect, the good ripple effect on their team of they're excited. Oh, things are changing. It's going to get better. Oh, they're asking me my opinion. They trust me and we're part of this process. We're articulating the vision. Now I get what we're part of. I'm part of something bigger than myself. We're not just putting sticks and bricks together. We're part of something bigger. And it's always exciting to see the impact that it has on the teams. So let me ask you this. What are you enjoying about your work with this group?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I mentioned at the very beginning, leadership, training, coaching. It's always been a passion of mine to help people become better versions of themselves. And so anytime I get to influence people in a positive way, that just feels really fulfilling for me. But also to be in a space where I have this knowledge and this experience and this expertise of being in the industry on a much larger scale. I worked for really big production builders, which the benefit of that is we had processes really dialed in. And so now I can take that knowledge and I can come down to some of these smaller business owners and say, hey, it might be on a much smaller scale, but these systems make sense and these processes make sense. So I'm able to share a lot of that with them. And it's also been so rewarding to get to know them a little bit more personally and to have some of these group calls and to introduce them to one another. I mentioned this at the beginning too, but that has been probably another surprising, especially to the clients, a surprising benefit of being in some of these programs is you now have this network of people that you can connect with and that you can trust and you can reach out to. And it's been nice to see some of those connections starting to happen and seeing them reach out to one another and to collaborate on different things because there's so much going on in our worlds. And especially with all of the outside influences that we really don't have a ton of control over, but there are ways we can work around it, right? And so now they're seeing Well, okay, well, what are you doing over here in your market? Oh, I think I could do that over here. So it's just getting this sense of optimism and leveling up, if you will, on a personal level for each of them as well as their business. And it's so exciting and rewarding to be a part of that.
Well, you're doing a great job. And you didn't know I was going to do this, but I have some feedback. A couple of our clients have shared some feedback. Leah's been a great addition to the Construction Leading Edge team. Her experience and input have already made a positive impact on our interactions. I'm looking forward to building our relationship and growing from her insight as we move forward. And then one of the others that came in this is from Alex. While we were in Fort Lauderdale, I enjoyed hearing her talk about the customer experience and other input she offered throughout the day. I was motivated to start working again on my client experience. And also, he mentioned that one of your comments really resonated with him when you talked about the safety and security that females need to feel. He was able to understand that better and understand a very different perspective. And he's been using the box breathing exercise that he taught us as well. So
awesome.
He's says it sounds like she's going to bring some great additions to the program. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for all the work you're doing. I'm excited about the future. Really appreciate all the work you're doing, and so do our clients.
Well, thank you, Todd. That was a nice surprise. That was really great to hear. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, this has been great. So we'll wrap this up. And so if you are interested in working with us in the Systematize Your Construction Business program, we'll have some more details about that in just a couple of minutes. Leah, this has been great. Anything else we need to do to put a ribbon on this interview? Any parting wisdom or anything else that you thought of that we need to talk about?
This is just popping into my mind, and especially as you were talking about like financial systems. One of the things that's really cool about all of this is when you gain greater clarity, even if the clarity is like, "Ooh, I got some work to do here," you're well suited to actually move forward now instead of just shooting blindly in the dark and hoping that something will work. And so I guess the final word I would say is if you're in this space where you feel super overwhelmed, things are chaotic, you're not entirely sure what direction to go next in your business, give us a call and let us chat with you a little bit, because it may feel really overwhelming. And even if you gain this clarity and this awareness of things that you might not want to see, at least now you have a game plan to move forward. But most people aren't having that experience. It's even better than that, beyond having the awareness and then moving forward, they're excited about everything that's going, that's to come. And so it's a benefit to at least explore this and see what this could do for you personally and for your business.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.
If you own a construction business, I want you to imagine this. Imagine that your team is solving problems quickly with fewer mistakes and without you. In other words, they're taking ownership. Your phone is ringing a lot less with questions, you're getting a lot fewer emails, and fewer problems are landing in your lap. You have time to think, time to operate strategically and be proactive. You have time and the mental bandwidth to work on the business instead of being stuck working in it. Your projects run more smoothly. They start on time. There are fewer fires to put out, and you finish them on schedule. You know what you want your business to look like 2 years in the future, and you have a plan to get there. If that sounds good to you, I would invite you to check out my free online training workshop titled Get Out of Your Business, How to Make It Run Without You This Year. You can watch it free by going to constructionleadingedge.com/get out. Here's what you'll get out of this webinar. You'll learn your first few crucial steps if you want to spend more time working on your business instead of being stuck working in it. You'll learn 3 things you should absolutely do before you make your next hire. You'll learn a proven process to design your construction business for the future, how to motivate your team to take more ownership and solve problems without you, and a lot more. You can watch the free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. And if you want to work with my team to systematize your construction business, go to that link, watch the video, and click the button to schedule your strategy call with my team. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I have one challenge and one request for you before you go. Here's the challenge. What is your 5-minute action item from this podcast? In other words, what is one thing you want to implement in your business or on your projects that will take you 5 minutes or less? My challenge for you is to create an action item as soon as this podcast is over and do it. Send yourself a text, send yourself an email, put it in your planner, write it down in your unicorn journal, whatever it is, but take action on something from this podcast episode so you get some real value from it. Now, here's the request. If this podcast has been valuable to you, please leave a rating and a review. Here's how to leave a review on Apple Podcasts on your iOS device. Number 1, open up the Apple Podcast app. Number 2, go to the icons at the bottom of the screen and choose search. Search for this show, Construction Leading Edge. Be sure to click on the show, not the episode. Then scroll all the way down to ratings and reviews, and finally click on write a review. These instructions will also be in the show notes. If you could leave a rating and a review, that would mean a lot to me, and it also helps get the word out there to other folks. And don't forget, if you want to get out of your business and make it run without you this year, go watch my free online training workshop at constructionleadingedge.com/get out. That's constructionleadingedge.com/GETOUT. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Todd Dawalt. I'll see you next time.